So this is the video going through the slideshow. So in case you miss our Google Meet that goes over it, you can play this instead. Let's get started. What I want to do is talk to you a little bit about the basics of holding a pencil and drawing. And I know that some of you may feel like you already have a good grip, and maybe you do. Maybe you do hold a pencil really well. I'm not really concerned about where the fingers are when you do this. I'm more concerned about whether or not you're tightly gripping that pencil. If you grip a pencil too tight, you're far more likely to press too hard with it. And especially if you're using an overly sharpened pencil or a mechanical pencil, this can really damage the paper. And it makes these lines not only seem artificial because they're so dark, but it also makes it really difficult to erase them if you need to. So ideally, the way you're holding a pencil, if somebody were to come by and pull on that pencil, they should be able to pull it out of your hand. If you're gripping so tight that it would be a battle between you and them for control of that pencil, that's too hard. So I would suggest if you find that you have a heavy hand when you draw, take some pages to just scribble lightly and let your mind and your hand realize that you don't actually have to press with a pencil to make a mark. It's okay to just let it lightly glide over the paper. Protect your drawing from your hand. If you're like me, you get so into what you're doing that you forget that the side of your palm can really move that graphite around a lot. Just as a reminder, graphite is what's inside a pencil. So if you hear like pencil lead, that's just an old phrase. It's not lead. It hasn't been for a very long time. So this is graphite, not lead. What you could do is put a piece of paper that your hand rests on the drawing. And then you can move that paper around as you see fit. That paper is far less likely to move graphite around than the oils in your hand, especially if you use a lot of lotions and things. Your hands can be kind of oily, and that can leave its own marks on the paper as well. So, the case against mechanical pencils. I know that there are artists out there that do some preliminary drawings with mechanical pencils. I've been doing this a long time and I was a drawing major, and I can tell you from experience that the mechanical pencils that you see over here are terrible for drawing. Now, if you're doing something really precise like drafting or math, like if you're doing geometry and that kind of thing, by all means, grab your mechanical pencil and have at it. That's a great tool to use for that job. But if you're trying to actually draw something and have realistic looking images, they're terrible. They dig into the paper because they're too sharp, and they are completely incapable of doing deep, rich shading. Now, if you have something that looks more like what you're seeing here, that's different. The ones on the right are actually meant for drawing. They're big chunks of graphite that happen to be in a mechanical holder. That's fine. But the stuff on the left, please do not draw with those. So drawing pencils and how to use them. Um, I would love to be able to give you something down here on the H scale. Those are particularly hard graphite, and so they draw lightly, and they're really good for drawing something out lightly first and then shading with your darker pencils. However, the only things I was able to get you are 2B and higher. So you have what's known as a number 2 pencil, and that is a medium graphite, meaning that it's just soft enough that it can do some dark and some light. That 9B that I gave you, that is for super dark shading. It will be the richest, deepest, darkest graphite you've ever worked with. It's gorgeous, but it is not for when you start a drawing, it's for later. Using a variety of pencils is best. And I really like this illustration because you can see how using what's essentially a number 2 pencil can give you a wide variety of values, more so than something that's really far on the H scale or really far on the B scale. But you can see in the second image how if you have a variety, even if it's just a number 2 and in our case a 9B, you can get some really rich, beautiful tones with it. So I would suggest keeping good track of that shading pencil because it can really help you to have images that have high contrast and really pop. Also, don't be afraid to have contrast. I would rather you try to shade something dark and have it go horribly wrong, and then you can learn from it, as opposed to leaving everything light. Leaving everything light, not to make anyone feel bad, but that is kind of the coward's way out, right? It's definitely something I struggled with when I was younger too, where you're so afraid of ruining your picture that you never finish it because you don't push in those deeper values. So, our drawing process, typically what you want to do is start off light and build up to the dark. So, you can see how here on the left side, you have a fairly light drawing. Some areas got a little dark, but that's okay if you're going to shade that area dark later. Here, they've blocked off some areas that they want to have at least at a medium value. And then they smoothed some of this out and added some deeper, richer tones. Ideally, the value or lightness and darkness of a line will match the shadow next to it. So if you can see here, there's a slight line, but it is very close to the value that is right there on the left side of the nose. Up here, originally, those were just dark lines on the left side of the eye, but now they fit in far more with the values that are next to them. And the line that's at the top of that lid looks beautiful because of the shadows there that are a similar value to that pencil mark. So, when photographing your work to turn it in, what I want you to do is try to get as much natural lighting as you can. If that means that you open the blinds in a room, great. If that means you can take it outside, great. But obviously, the priority here is to keep your work safe. So if it's raining outside, don't take your stuff outside to photograph. You're not going to get good sunlight anyway. It is better to be a little bit away from your work and then just crop it later than to get up too close to it and have it be blurry. Take a few pictures, maybe change your lighting a little bit and then see which one looks better. Sometimes what I do is you do one with flash and one without and see which one actually had better lighting when I was done. Also, whatever you set your picture on tends to change the color of the actual photo. What I mean by that is if I put a black and white picture of mine on a blue piece of cloth, sometimes my phone will, its little camera anyway, will overcompensate and actually make my paper look blue. So, again, try this in different ways, in different circumstances, and see which one looks best. Because really, even if we go back to the classroom, I'm still going to have you turn in pictures of your work. It's really just the safest way to do this. So, the projects in this unit. First, we're going to do a value scale practice. What does that mean? Well, that means that in your sketchbook, you are going to try doing different value scales. A value scale goes from dark to light. It doesn't have to start on the left or right side, it doesn't matter. So these you can see start out dark on the left and end up light on the right. You can reverse that and you're still perfectly fine. If you're a lefty, go for it. So the first style of shading of value scale is blending, and you don't have to actually physically blend your blending. What this means is your lines are close enough together that we don't really see the spaces in between them. Hatching, we definitely see the lines there. They are all parallel to each other, closer together on the left, so they're darker, farther apart on the right, so they're lighter. Same with cross hatching, except these lines can be perpendicular. So now they can go in two directions, but they're still closer together to make it darker and farther apart to make it lighter. Blending has to be done with graphite in this case. Hatching, cross hatching, stippling, those can definitely be done with a pen if that's what you're into, that's cool. Stippling is all done with dots, but it's the same principle. They're closer together, they're darker. Farther apart, they're lighter. Stippling is unnervingly annoying, not only for anyone who's near you who hears the tap, 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 but also because it takes forever to actually fill in a space. When we want to fill in a space really well, we call that saturation. And getting full saturation with stippling is very difficult. We also have scumbling, which I think scribbling would be a better word for it. The thing is, you have irregular lines. They're not parallel, they're not perpendicular, they're not dots, they're just lines that go in different directions in chaotic ways. But again, where there's more of them, it's darker. Where there's less of them, it's lighter. So you are going to make essentially what I have here. The thing is, you don't have the wide variety of pencils that I do. So on yours, you're going to have 5 full value scales using blending, hatching, cross-hatching, stippling, and scumbling. You are also going to have 2 value scales using a medium and dark graphite pencil. You do not need to make a light one, despite what this says, because, well, you don't have that light pencil, and I'm not going to punish you for not having something. I also need you to label all your exercises. You can have more than this in your sketchbook, but you can't have less. So if you want to doodle on this page, that's fine. As long as I get those basic things, you're good. Now, the value scale drawing. What I want you to do is apply what you've learned about value scales here on an actual drawing. Now, this is too simple of a drawing. What I'm trying to show you here is how light works. So you can see the highlight being cast slightly to the left and up to the top, and then there's a midtone that encircles it, a core shadow that's much darker, and then reflected light and a cast shadow. That reflected light is when light is touching the table and bouncing back. So that sphere actually has a little bit of lighter values before you see the shadow of where it connects with the table. This is really important because you notice there is no dark line around this object. Most of the time, your deep, dark shadows are not around the outside. Oftentimes, there's a deep shadow within the object, not outside of it. So if you draw those heavy marks that we talked about earlier, your work's going to look really artificial, like a coloring book. Coloring books are wonderful. I love them. They are very therapeutic. What they are not is realistic. So when it comes to erasing, I would rather you never erase than erase too much. Here's the reason. Erasing tends to cripple your self-esteem. What it does is keep saying, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. What I do with my own work is I do not erase until I have a line that I want to keep, and I need to get rid of the one I don't want. The reason for this is because if I just keep erasing without a solution in mind, I'm just going to keep repeating that same pattern over and over and over again. And I can't tell you how many times I've had students come up to me with eraser marks all over their paper of where they used to have their drawing. And I'll just go right back over it. And they're like, oh, well, you can do it. Ugh, why can't I? And I'm like, sweetie, you did. You absolutely did. You just didn't trust yourself. So again, I would rather things be completely out of proportion, wacky, weird, and just unnervingly odd than for you to erase away your self-esteem. So here's what I did. I am not making a video of a video, but essentially I'm showing you there how I made what I made. So I want you to draw whatever you want that has value scales in it. In my case, the hair is the value scales. My picture is much bigger than just what's cropped there. But if you want to draw anime characters, great. Just put value scales in there. If you want to draw your frustration at quarantine or social injustice or whatever else, just make sure that there are value scales in it. So yeah, you'll see a rubric for that on Canvas. 5 basic forms. Now this one, is normally very boring to me. I don't like having to draw these. I find it really boring. If you've already kind of mastered shading and this is really rudimentary for you, let me know and we can talk about upping the game a little for you. But with that in mind, I have two different versions of this project so that we can have something more for beginners and then something else for people that already feel like they've mastered this part. Either one is fine. I'm not judging you no matter which one you pick. So, our five basic forms are cylinder, cone, sphere, cube, and pyramid. Now, these all teach us basically how shadows tend to lie on objects, right? These five forms are on your final for the semester. You need to know them. All right. So here's what you can do. You can do option one, which you see on the left. It's just the five basic forms. And in fact, if you just want to draw that, that's fine. I'm not going to judge you for it. You can just be like, yeah, I saw the picture, I drew it. It's all good. If you're like, oh dear God, that is the most boring thing I've ever seen, and I would rather put my own flair on it, you can absolutely do that. Option number two is to make a drawing with all five forms in high contrast in whatever circumstances you want. So you can add whatever you want. The drawing you see there is fantastic. It has a cone, but the cone is broken up, right? So, it has a cube, but parts are missing, and then you can see a bit of another cone through it. That's amazing. That's fantastic. But you don't have to do that. If you're looking at option two and you're like, dear God, no, I do not want to do that, just do option one. So, I just lectured you on how to take pictures of things. My picture didn't turn out all that great. It's in higher contrast in person, I swear. But that is my example where I have the floating forms and then I have a hand that's, I don't know, juggling them. I don't know. It was late at night when I drew it. But anyway, here's what you have to have. You have to have all five forms. You have to have value scale shading on all forms. Shadows cast by them or around them. So in my case, the shadows are around them because they're not on a surface. Drawing and shading are in graphite in this case because I need to know that you can do these value scales. And then a mostly consistent light source. I am not a super picky grader. If you've done it, I'm cool with it. I'm not going to be like, oh, you got most of it right, but then there's this little part right here. Just try to be consistent, you know? And then I want you to understand that this one should not be done in your sketchbook. This one should be on a separate piece of paper as an actual project. I want you to take your time on it. I want it to look as good as you can make it. If you make mistakes and you're really upset about it, let me know so that I can give you points back on your rubric. Again, I would rather that you try and fail than not try. Okay. And then once I've graded these, I am going to have awards for 4 categories with this project. The first, most skilled drawing. This is really the one where the super talented people are going to win. So the good news is they're all going to be considered in one category. So if you don't feel like you're one of those people, that they're all in one group. So they're the most skilled, right? Next is most creative. This one does not have to be the best drawing. This is the one that's the most creative solution. So this is probably going to go to someone who did something really weird that I've never seen before. The next one is most detailed drawing. Doesn't mean that it's shaded the best. It doesn't mean that it's drawn the best. It means that they pushed details into this thing until it became a gloriously complex thing. So, maybe if you're not particularly good at shading yet, you might win that one. The highest contrast, that's somebody who really pushed in a lot of changes in value just everywhere, where this thing could be easily seen from a mile away. So those are our 4 award categories. I am going to have a page here on Canvas that says, what the categories are. It has the examples under each one, so it'll have the picture that won. I'm also going to have honorable mentions, ones that were really considered. Just they didn't win, but they almost won. So not only are these recognized as being the coolest, the best, but you also get 10 points of extra credit. The honorable mentions get 5. Um, I don't want this to be something that makes you feel bad. I want this to be something to strive for that's positive because I don't want this class to be about punishing those who don't make it. I want it to be about rewarding those who are really invested. So let me know if you have any questions about those or anything else here. And I hope you have a great day.